And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Laura.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cheese O'Clock. Tonight's, as you know, is Break Out the Bubbles. Hopefully you have done that. We have some amazing bubbles waiting to be broken out that we're going to get to shortly. I am really pleased to join my colleague, Janet Fletcher, for the last round of 2021 Cheese O'Clock. We also have two special guests. One is Jason Villalobos. He is the Tasting and Hospitality Manager for Sanford Winery. And we have Tony Hook, who is the co-founder and owner of Hook's Cheese in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Welcome to you both. And we are really excited to hear about your both your wines. Well, not your wines, Jason, but the ones you represent, and your cheeses, Tony. It'll be really kind of fabulous. I am the author of many books on cheese, and I am a speaker on the same subject and cheese and wine pairing. So that's who I am. And with that, let me introduce my colleague, Janet Fletcher.
Hi, everybody. I am Janet. I'm here in my Napa Valley kitchen, and like Laura, I'm the author of cheese books. Like Laura, I teach a lot about cheese and do this virtual hosting thing, which is we've been doing since the pandemic started, and that's really what launched Cheese O'Clock 18 months ago. And we've had a lot of cheese and wine under our belts since then, and hope to continue. I just want to remind you that we love to see your cheese party. So if you've got friends over, or if you've made a beautiful cheese board, please take a picture of it and post on social media, on Instagram. We'd love it if you'll use the hashtag Cheese O'Clock so we can find it. And we'd love to see how you're celebrating Cheese O'Clock at home. Today, as Laura said, it's Break Out the Bubbles. So we are going to share with you 4 cheeses that we think go great, or we hope will go great with sparkling wine. I think Laura agrees with me that if there's that one wine you're going to take to the desert island to have with your cheeses, it's going to be bubbles, because they just have that ability to cross a lot of different cheese styles. You see that with the 4 that you have on your tray. They're incredibly different. They could not be more different, but we're going to see, I think, that they all have a reason to go with the sparkling wines that we've chosen. So back to Laura to introduce our wine guest.
Right. While we're on the subject of wine, so as I said just a moment ago, Jason is the hospitality and tasting room manager at Sanford, has a lot of tasting room managing experience at other wineries too, and also I guess at the resort, not tasting room, but in a different capacity at Bacara, the fabulous hotel just north of Santa Barbara. One I have driven by but not stayed in yet. Yet is the operative word there. Anyway, and also, Jason, I understand you are a runner, so that's kind of a good combination of wine and running, or something like that. Anyway, welcome. Absolutely. And please tell us about these bubbles that we are drinking tonight. I took a preview sip of each, and wow, I kind of can't wait to go back to them.
This is incredible. Janet, Laura, thank you so much for having me. I feel like this is manifest destiny. Finally, I can tell my mother I'm getting paid to drink and eat fine cheeses. This is a thrill for me. I'm also thrilled to talk about Champagne Lançon and the 15 Brut Cuvée from Sanford and Benedict. What I really like about both these wines and the wineries behind them is the commitment to the fruit. Because as we all know, you can't make a dynamic, beautiful, articulate, well-received wine without incredible work in the vineyard first. Now, Champagne Lançon is over 200 years old, and they source 50% of their fruit from Grand Cru vineyards. We don't use the term Grand Cru here in the United States necessarily, but if there was a Grand Cru classification, that certainly would be both the Sanford and Benedict and Recanati vineyards. Speaking more specifically about Champagne Lançon, I need to go ahead and take a prerequisite sip here real quick. So I'd encourage everyone to please go ahead and get those festive sweaters out and take a little sip of Champagne Lançon. Ooh, what I love about this is it's toasty, has beautiful hints of honey. There's some beautiful ripe fruit. I can't think of a better dynamic duo as far as bubbles go as we enter in the festive holiday season. I mean, this can be something you celebrate with family and friends around the dinner table, both not at New Year's, and then maybe have some quiche Lorraine the next day if you have any left over with brunch. The acidity and minerality just lends itself so beautifully to the cheeses that we're having today. And I think it was in the introduction, we talked about how bubbles really transcends so many different food types. And really, I always have at least 6 to 7 bottles of sparkling wine chilled in my refrigerator at all times. So party over at my house. You're all invited. What I also really love about the sparkling wine I'm trying today, about the 15 Brut Cuvée specifically, which I also drink very often, is that beautiful crystalline clarity and minerality, and that beautiful acidity, again, is begging for some soft, fatty cheese. It's tailor-made for like a tall grass and a picnic basket. I know we're nearing the time of year where we're mostly turning the fireplace on, putting on the warm socks and thinking about gift giving, but there's always a place for sparkling in my house. Yeah. How's it going for you?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't care what time of year it is. It is always time for sparkling. But I'm curious. So, are the vineyards for the Brut Cuvée, the Sanford? Well, first of all, is it Chardonnay and Pinot Noir? Did you say that
Correct,
already?
yeah. That's 68% Pinot Noir. The remainder is going to be Chardonnay, and it's sourced both from the Ricchinata and Sanford and Benedict vineyards.
From both. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a great cuvée.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, Janet, why don't you introduce our cheese?
We have our cheese guest, Tony Hook, and we're going to be tasting his cheeses last, his blue cheese last. But we wanted you to know who this guy is on your screen with all the cheese behind him. He's from Wisconsin, from Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Tony Hook. Everybody in Wisconsin knows Tony from Hook's Cheese Company. He and his wife, Julie, were college sweethearts, and they married, and Tony started making cheese. He's been making cheese for 51 years, the way I count it, which is pretty amazing. And he and Julie started Hook's Cheese Company in '76. Right. So they're on 45 years of making. Cheddar is their main cheese, as we will hear from Tony, but blue is sort of their second, I would say, in importance of what they do, and they make some wonderful blues, and we're going to have a really special one tonight at the end of the tasting. I want to remind you to please keep that chat going. We'd love to hear from you. We're keeping an eye on it. If you have questions, you can ask them in the chat. We'll probably see them. If you have specific questions for us, we'll probably see them a little more easily if you use the Q&A, but we will keep also an eye on that chat. Also wanted to remind you that we are recording, and so we recorded last week's session, and we will keep those the cheese collections live on my site. If you want to purchase last week's because you missed it and watch the recording, or if you want to repeat this whole experience again with some friends, you can do that via the recordings. They will be live on my site and on Laura's site within a couple of days. So with that, I think Laura and I both thought before we started, we would say just a few things about how we pair cheese and sparkling wine, what we are thinking about when we do that. And I guess I'll start and Laura can add on to it. For me, what is so fabulous about sparkling wine is the bubbles, the carbonation that really cleanses your palate, because fat is what cheese is all about. We know cheese just coats our palate, coats our tongue, and it's so pleasing to have those bubbles come along and just cleanse your palate and get you ready for another taste. So for me, that contrast of carbonation and fat is what's so pleasing. And so often I will try to pair sparkling wine with something that's very rich and luscious and creamy. And we have a couple of examples of that tonight, but there are lots of other harmonies between sparkling wine and cheese. So Laura, I'm curious what you're thinking about when you pair the two.
So when it comes to pairing of any kind, I mean, not of any kind, but cheese and wine, it's not just about flavor or taste, it's about texture. So we're not, when you think of texture, you think of it with regard to cheese, but you might not think of it with regard to wine. But there's texture in wine, whether it's the body, the mouthfeel, as we call it, or in this case, whether it's bubbles. And as you're saying, Janet, those bubbles act as scrubbing bubbles. They cleanse your palate to make way for another bite of cheese and vice versa. Also, when it comes to sparkling wine, we know that with other foods, salty foods in particular, maybe caviar is a great example. That's what you pair with sparkling wines very often. And so cheese is the same way. Cheese is not excessively salty, or at least it shouldn't be, except for some. But it is still the idea that cheese, and I mean, that's one of the reasons that I was interested in having the blue cheese tonight, is because blue cheeses often are a little bit saltier than others. And so the contrast with the sparkling wine is in the acidity, which is key in sparkling wine, and all cheeses really kind of helps bridge that. But when we get there, we'll see, and Tony, you can weigh in on whether you think your cheese is salty or not. But I'm not talking your personality now. I'm just talking your cheese.
Right.
Well, I'm really curious about the first cheese because it's a style that I don't normally pair with sparkling wine. This cheese was really Laura's idea, and so I'm really curious to see, why you chose it, and because I don't typically pair this kind of goat cheese with sparkling wine. So let's dive in. You want
Oh, goodness.
The Caña de Cabra?
The pressure is on. Well, I've never done Caña de Cabra with sparkling wine. What I have done, though, is many fresher style goat cheeses. And so that's what kind of led me to this. So first, let me tell you all about Caña de Cabra. By now, you've probably consumed your entire piece. But in any case, this is a goat cheese from Spain. And it is named for Cabra is goat, and caña means cane or reed. And it's a log, and the whole log comes in a plastic, or comes on a plastic reed-like holder, if you will. And that keeps it keeps the air circulating around the rather delicate rind. And so this is a soft ripened goat cheese. It was inspired by a French cheese consultant who came to Spain at the behest of a company called Montesinos, and they wanted to know how to make a cheese. You'll sometimes see the French version called Boucheron in the stores, but this one to me has a little bit more density to it. And this is a section of the wheel. That's what we all received. And I cut a little disc out of it by using this kind of monster cheese cutter. I don't know if you can see, that's got a wire across it. Now the normal home one is smaller than this, but it's a great way to get a disc size, and then it keeps this part really neat and nice. And so that's a little aside. Now, when it comes to a cheese like this, the rind and the paste, the inside of the cheese, are going to be quite different, both texturally, going back to that texture thing again, and also flavor-wise. So just in smelling this cheese, which just has a bright, fresh, not goaty, but I'm just not mistaking the fact that I'm in goat milk territory here. It's the center, the paste is going to be a little bit firmer. And as this cheese ages, which, by the way, it takes about 3 weeks to make, it leaves Spain after 3 weeks, it's pasteurized, gets here at about a month. And then it will last, depending how it's tended, for several more weeks, but it will continue to soften around the edges. And so the rind is going to affect how the wine tastes differently than just the paste. So what I like to tell people to encourage people to do is try the cheese from the center out, try the inside paste with the wines in this case, and then try it with the rind with the wines. And my guess is you'll get a different sensation, different flavors. Some people don't like it with the rind, just the cheese, forget about the wine. And some people do. The rind is definitely, I shouldn't say definitely, I haven't tried this piece yet. Most times it's edible if it's not already ammoniated, which is something that happens with this style of cheese over time. But technically it's edible, but it's about whether you like it or not, as to whether you actually eat it. Okay, so that's the long way of saying try the cheese without the rind with the wines, and then try it with the rind with the wines, and see how it's different. So Jason, did you follow all that?
I did, and you know what? I've already jumped ahead of you. I decided
Good.
I love it both ways. I'm a rind man, and sometimes the biggest pleasures are the most unexpected. And I love the idea of this with a picnic. I can see myself in the park. I can see myself in my backyard on a sunnier day with a bottle of the Champagne Lanson or the 15 Brut Cuvée. And I just think that effervescence of the sparkling lends itself such a beautiful contrast with the smoothness and just the deliciousness of this cheese. It's doing all the good things, all the right things for me.
Well, one of the things the reason, Janet, to address what you said earlier, I find that the lemony kind of acidic characteristics of goat cheese are nice with with the acidity of sparkling wines and the sometimes lemony, bright notes of a sparkling wine or champagne in this case. And so that was what led me to it. I will say that just my first taste with the Brut Cuvée from Sanford with the goat cheese, with the Cabra, is that the Cabra was a little bit richer than the wine to me. So I feel like I like the texture of the wine and the acidity of it, but I'm not sure that they did not go together. I wouldn't say that it was just a seamless kind of pairing that for me, but I like it. How about you, Janet?
Well, I have to say, I was really surprised by this cheese. I think Laura and I were both concerned about it because we didn't like the way it was wrapped. It was wrapped, when it came to you, it was wrapped in plastic wrap, and then it was vacuum sealed, and it was smothered. And I have to say, this is not the way the rind should be. It's not supposed to be damp like that. And we were both very concerned that it wouldn't taste good. I think it tastes amazing.
It does
I think
taste
the
good.
rind is fine. I'm not getting ammonia. I get that wonderful lemoniness. The texture of this cheese, of the paste, is so delightful. There's no chalkiness. I know some of you have probably had goat cheeses that you think are just chalky and goaty, and this is just so smooth and creamy and lemony. I prefer it with the Sanford because of I think that the Sanford is more austere than the Lanson, and I like that kind of steeliness of the Sanford sparkling wine with the lemoniness of the cheese. But I am super pleased with how this cheese is tasting, especially because I was worried.
I just have to say, I think it matters what order you try it in, because I actually preferred it with the Lanson. But I tried the Sanford first, and then I tried the Lanson, and I'm not sure if that didn't affect things. So Tony, have you tried? Well, do you have any insights, by the way, on the cheese that you wish to share as a cheesemaker? And if not, that's fine. And or about the wine and the cheese or anything around these lines?
I thought it was very good. I thought the rind was excellent. You were concerned that it might not be, but I thought it was excellent. And again, I thought the same way you did. I thought it was better with the Lanson, but very good.
Yeah. Just so you know, folks, I mean, what you want from this type of rind, this is what we call a bloomy rind. It's white mold that blooms on the outside. You don't want it to be slimy. And as I'm touching this, it's moist, it's damp, and it really shouldn't be. It should be more dry. But it doesn't seem to have hurt it any in terms of flavor. It's tasting really, really good.
Well, and the cheese, the cheese importer, a woman named Michelle Buster from Forever Cheese is the importer, said that, in case anybody is wondering, that to store this cheese, what she does is she puts it in a, and we sent out instructions kind of along these lines, but what she does is she puts it in a, because she wants to preserve the rind. And so she puts it in a plastic container, but not really closed. And then she just covers the surface of the cut surface of the cheese. So not the rind, but she just turns it like this way. So this is the cut surface, and just covers it, just covers the top, but not the outside here, not the rind, and puts it in her fridge. So that's what I've been doing, and with very happy results, like the rest of us, I think.
Well, let's move on to our next cheese. We've only plenty of time for Tony. So this is this beauty from France. And the thing you need to note about this is, at first, I love the way they kind of treat it like a cupcake in the little paper wrap. Notice how that top is concave. It's sunken. Now, normally when you make cheese, you don't want that. You want this beautiful kind of even surface, and cheesemakers go to great lengths to turn the cheeses often so that they come out symmetrical. With this cheese, which is Langres, and I'm going to type it into the chat in case some of you who don't have it, we're having Langres from the Champagne region of France, and it is one of the few cheeses made in that region, Champagne, Burgundy. It is purposely made without all that turning so that it will develop that concavity on top. And in France, what they do is sometimes they pour a little bit of champagne in that. It's called a fountain, a fontaine, and they put a little bit of champagne in there, or sometimes a little bit of brandy, the mar, the brandy of the region, and they eat the cheese that way. I actually prefer to keep my sparkling wine in my glass and just have the cheese separately. This cheese actually has some color added to the outside. That's what's giving it that kind of golden hue. It's a plant dye called annatto that's used. I'm sure Tony uses it in those cheddars that are behind him. This is cow milk. And look at the wrinkles on the outside, that kind of brainy look. Cheese people call it a brainy rind. It's from a mold that they add to the milk, Geotrichum candidum, that creates that kind of wrinkly or brainy rind. This is going to be very soft inside. It's going to be very oozy and luscious, and you can tell that even before you slice into it. Look how
Janet,
absolutely luscious that is.
Janet, can I ask you, so I haven't figured out, because this is a new cheese for me. I believe it or not, I've never had this cheese, even though I've seen it for years and years and years. I'm excited to try it. But what I was going to do, it felt like something I should put a spoon in the middle of where that concavity is, and just go from the top. But is it not that kind of a cheese? Should I be slicing it? Would you
go for it? No, I mean, I would say in France, I've never seen that done, or no, I haven't. But this is super ripe, so you certainly could. Yeah, I mean, Laura's referencing some of the Spanish and Portuguese cheeses that get so runny that you scoop them, and this cheese is almost there. It is just amazingly spreadable. And ripe. It is ready. I wouldn't want to go another week on this cheese, but it is perfection and very yeasty and mushroomy and kind of meaty, beefy.
It smells smoky to me.
Yeah, that kind of meaty quality. It's not smoked, but it's a very powerful cheese, and I love it with the Lançon. I haven't tried it with the other. You definitely want a little piece of baguette with this kind of cheese, or
for sure.
Yeah. Honey, what do you think of it,
Tony?
Oh, that's excellent. Both wines, again, I like with the Lançon, but you almost think when you look at it, it's something looking like a Limburger with the B linens, but it doesn't have that, but it does have the soft rind, and it's an excellent flavor.
Tony, is this, from your expertise, would you say this is a difficult cheese to make well?
I would think it would be, because you want to get it out there and you want to get it to the consuming public right at the peak where we've got it, but that's very difficult to do, to hit it right at the right time. So yes, to get the moistures right and to get it out to the consumer at the right time, it's a difficult challenge.
Jason, did you have a wine preference? Did you have a wine preference?
I love the chiseled minerality of the 15 Brut Cuvée with this. I was really charmed as I was kind of unmasking this cheese just by the look of it. I thought, wow, that's a cheese I'm going to fall in love with. I think you're absolutely right on the money when you talk about how smooth and delectable this is. I want a French baguette. I want some crackers. I want some friends to celebrate this cheese with. I think this is just excellent. I just have an explosion of joy and happiness across my palate.
Yeah, it's very rich cheese. It's very mushroomy. I see somebody said bacon. I think that's an interesting descriptor. It does have just a lot of umami, that big savory taste that lingers. I'm curious if some of you find it's too strong. I would love to know that in the chat. If some of you say, it's just too much for you, because it is a big, bold cheese, and not all that well known. So, what did you think, Laura? Since it's you're new to Langres.
Well, God, what's there not to like with this cheese? I'm ready to take a bath in it tonight. I think it's awesome. I also, what I actually find that so this kind of brings to mind that to me, it's not very challenging. It's not a stinky cheese. It looks like it would be, but so I was surprised to hear you say that this is annatto, not bee linens, as Tony, you were saying. Bee linens, for everybody that definitely doesn't know, because why would you, it's just a certain bacteria that effectively creates the stinkiness or the smelly cheeses that we think of when we see these orange rinded soft cheeses. We don't think of it, actually, we smell it, then we think of it. But anyway, in this case, it's not that kind of a cheese. And so I feel like it's milder than I was expecting. Partly that's visual, but also just empirically, I would say that it is not a strong cheese, mine. But we all got different cheeses. So what I'm tasting might be different than what you, Janet, are tasting, might be different than you, Jason and Tony, and everybody and all of you. So we might be having different experiences, at least slightly.
Yeah, I would say mine is really mushroomy, kind of compost smells, which is a good thing. I just love this cheese and feel like it's really underappreciated. And, I love that it has this historical association and geographical association with the Champagne region. So that's why I wanted to bring it into our tasting tonight. We probably should move on to our next cheese, because I know we have a video to show.
We do.
For it.
We do. So the next cheese is made by Kaltbach in Switzerland, but it's represented, well, the company is called Emmy Roth, and the Roth part of that is in Wisconsin. And the cool part of Kaltbach is the name of the caves in which the Kaltbach cheeses are aged. So you may have seen their Gruyere and you may have seen their Emmentaler. But this cheese, Le Crémeux, is a little bit less well known and actually my favorite. And so now we're going to show you the video that kind of uncovers some of the secrets of why this cheese is what it is. So let's show it, and then I'm going to tell you a little more on the other side. Hannah, are you there? There we go.
Ich muss daheim 5:24 abfahren. Dann komme ich nämlich schön vor der Barriere durch. Wenn ich später abfahre, dann muss ich bei der Barriere warten und das ist gut 5 Minuten verspielt. Hier sind wir in der Kaltbach-Höhle. Was die Höhle auszeichnet, dass das hier innen alles natürlich ist, dass man nichts befürchten muss, nichts abkühlen. Ob es das im Sommer draussen gegen 40 Grad ist oder im Winter 20 minus. Dank der Feuchtigkeit, die der Quarzsandfelsen hat, ist auch die Temperatur immer bei 12,5 Grad. Bis das Wasser in diesen Höhlengängen unten ist, vergehen rund 2 Jahre. Bis der also auf den Kopf tropft oder mehr halt auf die Glatze. Der Käse wird in der Höhle ausgereift, veredelt. Das heisst, wir pflegen die Käse mit unserer Höhlensulze, sodass die Geschmacksannoncen in den Käse können und den Käse so geschmacklich aromatisch besser machen, eben den Käse in diesem Sinn veredeln. Schon in den ersten 2-3 Tagen befallen die Emmentaler die Gamma-Berschenbakterien, die wir hier in der Höhle haben. Und dann fangen wir sie an zu pflegen. Bei den Emmentaler haben wir hier in der Höhle für gut 7000 Stück Platz, 20.000 Gruyère, Rahmkäse, den Bergkäse und die Extrawürzung. Im Ganzen haben wir hier in der Höhle gut 120.000 Käse eingelagert. Das weiss man einfach, dass wirklich etwas Gutes halt auch seine Zeit braucht. Ein Gruyère und ein Emmentaler hat eine Reifungszeit von 12 bis 14 Monate. Bevor der Käse dann freigegeben wird, gehen wir noch einmal durch, machen Proben, degustieren die. Die meisten, die wir jetzt drin haben, die haben 19,5 oder sogar 20 Punkte. Und das ist dann auch die Voraussetzung, dass wir das Premium-Produkt mit unserer Pflege in den nächsten 9 Monaten herbringen, sodass dann eben die veredelten Kaltbach-Emmentaler zustande kommen. Also ich glaube, ich bin ein geduldiger Mensch, sonst machst du jeden, sonst sind auch einmal richtig fluchen. Wir sind ja hier schon unterboten, näher beim Teufel als im Himmel, dann darf man schon auch bei uns. Wenn du eben so ein Produkt herbringst, auf das Level, das dir zusagt, das ist auch das, was dich dann eben irgendwie stolz macht und das eben am Abend auch zufrieden zur Höhle ausgehst, auf den Heimweg. Ich bin der Michel, einer von den Höhlenmeistern von Kaltbach, die die Käse hegen, pflegen und veredeln.
I love that he said, it's so Swiss. I leave home at 5:24 in the morning.
Yeah, it's true. Oh my gosh. That cave is about 45 feet underground. So that's where he reports to work. As he said, he's closer to the devil than he is to heaven. So I would be swearing too, I think, if I had to report to work underground every day. But I think it's, oh my gosh, I really don't think I could see that video too many times. I just am so enthralled by it. And I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, what he's doing in those caves is being done in a lot of different places, primarily in Europe. There is an underground cave, if you will, in Brooklyn, the famous cheese aging town of Brooklyn, but it's called Crown Finish Caves, and they're really doing amazing things there. But in any case, so what he's doing is quite old world and quite not atypical still. The Emmentaler he was referring to, those wheels are 120 pounds. The Gruyere is 80 pounds. And the cheese we have today, Le Crémeau, is 9 pounds. So whereas Emmentaler and Gruyere are aged quite a long time, this Le Crémeau is only about 4 months old. And it is another distinctive characteristic of this cheese versus the Emmentaler and the Gruyere he referred to is that they add cream to it. And so it's got a creaminess, a richness to it. But yet it's still, quite obviously a firm cheese. It's not creamy like the long we just had before this. And it is, oh my gosh, I just love the smell of just the roasted onion aroma alone is so intoxicating. And you can imagine what this would be like. It's not only great in its just natural form like this, but melted, it's amazing. And with champagne and sparkling wine, I mean, you kind of can't go wrong. So I'm really curious. Please add in the chat, or if you, what your thoughts and sensations are with this cheese. And also, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or Janet and I are probably more likely to see it in the Q&A. So please ask your questions there. But anyway, I really want to know what y'all think. And I'm going to try it too, because I haven't done that yet.
Well, I'm using my cheese plane.
Yeah.
This is the kind of cheese I really like to shave because I think you get more aroma that way. You've got more surface area. So I shaved it, and I get, like Laura, the roasted onions and kind of a mustardy sort of smell, just roasted nuts. This is in that luscious wave of cream on your tongue. I did want to point out one thing that maybe you saw him doing in the video. He had a hammer and he was tapping the surface of the cheese. He's listening. He's actually listening to that cheese, because when he hears kind of a hollow sound, he knows that there are cracks developing in the cheese, and that's the sign that the wheel is ready. You don't want a lot of cracks in the cheese, but when it's mature, it's going to start to get some little slits in it. And so that's what he's doing, and that's the incredible expertise of the affineur, the cheese ager, to be able to not just taste and smell your cheese, but to hear your cheese.
Yeah. Well, and listen, and I also talk about listening to your cheese in terms of when it's on your palate, because it seems kind of weird, like, what are you hearing? And I'm not talking texture in this case, like I was before. I'm talking about, it's all food. It's not just cheese. If we listen, so to speak, after we've taken a bite of it, it might take a few seconds, but it's going to start telling you what you're tasting. I think we try really, really hard to say, oh, it smells like this and it tastes like this. And immediately it might hit you what it tastes like, but sometimes the flavors will come back and be more pronounced, and the aromas too, if you let them. So that's what I call listening to my cheese, and therefore finding appropriate pairings. So speaking of pairings, I have to say so let me go back. The reason I think we, Janet, were interested in this cheese, or I was anyways, because of the cream. I think bubbles and cream. And so that's kind of what led me to this idea of this cheese. And I don't remember the original genesis, Janet, of this, but anyway, that was my thinking. And so Jason, I'm curious which you like, if both, neither, one.
Yeah, I really like the ripe fruit of the Champagne Lançon with this. Maybe I'm an outlier, but I was really struck by the video, how much commonalities we have with cheese making and winemaking, the passing on of traditions, the commitment to quality, and sort of like how much hard work and commitment it is to produce such an incredible product. And I think, both of these would be excellent. I think I'm just sort of leaning to the Lançon on this one.
And I want to just point out that when we had a little rehearsal run through, I want everybody to know this. When we had a little rehearsal run through, Tony was talking to us from his cave, his cheese aging area. No, and it's a little different than the Kaltbach caves, I think, Tony, but why don't you describe what your cheese aging is like?
So our facility, we're located in Mineral Point, rolling hills of southwest Wisconsin, and our facility is built into a big steep hill. So one corner of the building is basically underground. Cave number 1 is about 16 foot underground.
Oh.
And that is the cave I was actually video chatting with you guys.
Where you had Wi-Fi.
And I had Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you were in the new world. That was clear.
What do you think of the Kaltbach, Tony?
It's excellent. You can taste and feel the creaminess, but I also think you almost get the grassy notes from it. It's really excellent. Milder than you would expect from something like an Emmentaler, but very, very tasty.
Right.
Pairs well with both of the wines.
I think, what they were trying to do with this cheese was a couple of things. One, making that smaller format, the 9-pound wheel. It's a lot easier for a retailer to handle, to sell through a 9-pound wheel than an 80-pound wheel or 150-pound wheel. Right. So it makes sense at the retail level. And also, I think they were trying to make something that's just so approachable. Who doesn't love that cream, that sensation of cream on your tongue? Right. So it's not common. This is not a traditional cheese. This is a new cheese, and it is not really. It's part of a whole new wave in Switzerland of creating new things after many years of not being allowed to create new cheeses. In the last 20 years, the regulations have relaxed and they can create new cheeses, and they're doing things like this, adding cream, which in Switzerland is kind of really being out there. We may not see it as such a revolutionary step, but for a Swiss cheesemaker, it's really going against tradition to do that. And I think it's giving us a whole new taste experience. I love it. I'm loving it with the Lançon, which I think is, a slightly richer styled sparkling wine. What a match.
Yeah. And it's, what was I going to say? With the creaminess, actually, it's funny that you mentioned the cheese plane, Janet. I actually tried that, but it got caught up in my cheese plane because it was so creamy. Wow. So I had to revert to a knife. So I think it does depend on the sharpness of one's cheese plane.
You need a sharp, yeah, this one had no trouble. Well, I know we want to leave a lot of time for our guest, and Tony, I'm just really excited to have you here. I've been to your facility in Mineral Point. I think, we talk about like one stoplight town. Like, doesn't Mineral Point even have a stoplight?
It does not. All of Iowa County has one stoplight, and that's
Okay.
not in Mineral Point.
You are in the middle of nowhere, but it's well worth a visit. And you are a legend in Wisconsin. Folks, if you ever have the chance to go to the Madison Farmers Market, you must go. It is definitely one of the best farmers market in the country. And Tony is there, or usually there at his table. And that's where you can have some of Hook's cheeses that you won't see anywhere else, like his 10 and 15-year-old cheddars. So worth the journey to Madison. But today we have one of his incredible blues, and it is really, I would say, one of a kind. Tony, tell us about what we're about to taste and how you came up with this unique cheese.
So, we've been making cow milk cheeses, since I started making 51 years ago. But in 2009, we decided to branch out and start doing some sheep milk, and then a little later some goat milk, and then mixed milk cheeses. So we actually came up with the title of this cheese before we came up with the cheese, but we decided it would work well with a blue cheese and a mixture of milks, sheep, cow, and goat. And when you taste the cheese, we do age our blues typically about a year. Nobody else really does that, but we seem to think we get a better flavor, more flavor from it. And with the combination of the milks, it's a nice sweet flavor, but you get some lactic acid and some crystals from the aging. So it's a very unique cheese.
What would you say the different milks contribute? The goat, the cow, the sheep?
So, each milk, of course, has a different flavor. Everybody's used to cow milk. Goat milk has a little more of an earthy flavor, typically, kind of flavor you find in the back of your palate, in the back of your mouth. With sheep milk, you typically get more of a sweet flavor. So the combination, when you try the cheese, you can kind of taste all three of those. It's a combination that goes well together.
And would you tell people how you get the blue in the cheese? Not everybody.
So when you look at a wheel of blue cheese, you see holes in the top or the bottom, and most people think that it's injected. It is not injected. Typically, we will add the blue mold, approximately 6 ounces to a 10,000 pound vat. So it's a very minimal amount. And that's right about the time we add the starter culture, before we start ripening, cutting, cooking, making the cheese. We'll dip it, we'll put it into forms, we'll salt it, put it in the cave, bring it back out about 4 to 7 days later, and we'll pierce it with a 60-needle pierce machine. And all that's doing is letting air in. Once the mold can get air, it can start developing. So usually within about 9 to 10 days, the blue mold will start growing inside of those wheels. And it only takes typically about 3 weeks for it to really blue up. And they're ready. They haven't developed the flavor yet, but the blue mold itself has grown to the point where you need it to grow, just to start developing all of that blue flavor.
And then how do you stop the blue?
So typically, if we're going to age it about a year, we'll bring them out of the caves. We'll seal them loosely in a plastic bag and then put them in the cold storage. So the cold storage at 38 degrees starts cooling it down and kind of slowing all of the bacterial and mold processes down, and kind of keeps it in check.
A lot of Laura mentioned this, that we think of blue cheese as often as a little more salty. Does your blue, on a percentage basis, have more salt than, say, your cheddars?
Ours does not typically. We typically try to run about the same as the cheddars, percentage-wise about 1.75 to about 2%. I know some blue makers do try to run up somewhere 3, 4, 5%. And the reason is because the blue will grow better and faster with more salt. The blue really loves the salinity of the salt, but we feel we get a better flavor without quite as much salt. If you actually put a blue cheese like ours in a pasta or something and melt it, you do seem to get more of a salty flavor. And I think it's part of the penicillin roquefort flavor along with the salt. So it isn't more salt itself.
This is what I love about this cheese is it's so balanced. In part because of what you're saying. It's not as salty as a lot of blues. I think the three milks really play well together. They don't always, but very, very often they do. You make another cheese, the triple play, particularly the extra innings, which is essentially a cheddar made with all three milks. That's one of my very favorites. And go out and get that, folks. It's really good. But along those lines, so Wisconsin has a unique program, pardon me, called the Master Cheesemaker Program. And are you a master? And if so, in what?
Blues and cheddars.
So what that means is you go to school for like 3 years, right? And
Correct. So you have to go to school for 3 years. They take samples of your cheese along that program. So 3 or 4 times they'll test the cheeses, the blues, the cheddars, whatever you're taking your masters in, and make sure that it meets all of the specs along with all of the flavors that you're looking for in that particular cheese. And then at the end of the course, you have to take it's a take-home test, open book test, but it's, it takes about 50 hours.
wow.
Yeah. So
I'm getting a lot of crystals in your cheese. Is that pretty
yes,
typical?
so that's from the aging. So once you get, especially with blue cheese, with cheddar, you wouldn't get the crystals till maybe 5 years. But with the blue cheese, with the blue mold in there, the reaction to the penicillin roquefort and the proteins of the milk, you start getting those crystallizations. So you get like a calcium lactate crystal after about a year with a blue cheese. So typically the one you're trying is approximately 15, 16 months old.
Wow. No wonder it's so big. I have not had this cheese a lot of times, but I don't remember it as being quite
as many
dense.
crystals.
Yeah, and I think I didn't know we were having such a mature piece of cheese.
Yeah, it's
part of that relates to, again, COVID. The goat and sheep milk cheeses did not move as well in 2020 as cow milk. So
that's our game.
I don't know.
There we go.
It is. Everybody's game.
So Tony, speaking of aging and crystals, so you make a 15-year and a 20-year cheddar, right?
We have released a 20-year a couple of times. Yes, once last year.
Okay, and that was that. So that was what, like $1 million an ounce or something like that?
Close. It was $209 a pound.
Yeah. And are you going to release another one, another 20-year?
We will have a batch ready in 2 years.
And what about 15?
That one will be a white cheddar, as opposed to the last two have been an orange. The 15, we have a batch every year, typically around Christmas time. So we do have 15 available right now.
How do we get that?
Your credit card, Laura.
Well, there you go.
Yes, but I have to find a source.
iGourmet is able to get it from us.
Yeah.
A lot of the Whole Food stores carry it. Many areas in the Midwest and in Southern California, not as many in the San Francisco area.
Now, I thought that in Wisconsin, you just couldn't even sell a cheddar if it didn't have annatto, if it wasn't orange. Are Wisconsinites starting to eat more white cheddar?
That they are. It's still a stigma with a lot of people. That's white, it can't be cheddar.
Wow.
But we, like you said, we sell at the Dane County Farmers Market in Madison. And Madison being a very liberal college town, government, you get a lot of people that want everything pretty natural. So at the farmer's market, we probably sell all of the cheddars, we probably sell about 30% white and about 70% orange.
Wow.
We've got distributors on the East Coast, more people out there want white, but across the nation, it's probably somewhere around 40% white and 60% orange. So it's coming more towards the white.
And so what is it? Can you explain, Tony, what it is that makes the orange cheddar, orange cheddar orange?
Sure. So as you mentioned on the rind of the second cheese today, it's annatto. It's a vegetable coloring extracted from the seed of a bush that grows in South America, Brazil mainly. But it's very orange. It only takes three ounces per 1,000 pounds of milk to make the cheese that orange. So it's very, very minimal. You get a little bit on your finger, it's probably there for a week. It's pretty orange. But it doesn't really have much flavor. Some would say it may add a little bit of sweetness to the cheese. But typically it doesn't change the flavor of the cheese very much.
I get kind of an earthy flavor from it.
From the annatto.
Yeah, I do, when there's a lot of it. I know we do have a question about storing cheese, but before we address that, I think maybe we should talk about the wine. And
Sure.
Yes.
I love the expressiveness of this cheese. I've always been such a big fan of blue cheese. I love the texture of your cheese. I'm a real texture freak. And as I tasted this, I just went, wow, this is just, I really love it with the expressiveness of the 15 Brut Cuvée. I think it just has such a beautiful contrast. I love the yin and the yang of this sparkling wine and this cheese. I think this is so dynamic. It just really sings on the palate. It's just incredibly pronounced and lovely. I like the big swing. I like to swing big on my cheese, and this is really doing it for me. I think you're really knocked out of the ballpark with this. And I think it pairs so beautifully with the Sanford 15 Brut Cuvée. I think it's a match made in heaven.
It is very good. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very definite opinion, and I don't disagree. Although I do like it with a Lançon too. So just goes to show folks that sparkling wine and cheese is, you almost can't go wrong. I actually found that the Sanford, the 2015 Brut Cuvée, was kind of more of almost like a contrasting pairing with the cheese. The cheese is very savory. And as we've talked about now a lot, the salt is very just balanced. But still, that savoriness I find brings out the fruit a little bit more in the Sanford, and I kind of like that contrast. But I actually found the same thing to happen with the Lançon. And so typically champagne is leaner than New World sparkling wines. That's a generalization, but I have found that to be true most of the time. And yet, in the presence of this very bold cheese, but not strong, but just like it just got its own personality, in the presence of the Lançon, it kind of brings out the fruit that maybe I didn't get as much with the other cheeses in the Lançon.
I want to bring up another possibility, which we don't have in front of us, but it's something to think about when you have these blue cheeses, and that is a sparkling wine in a sweeter style, something like an extra dry or a demi-sec that has more residual sugar, and then you have, I think,
true contrast.
Sweetness and blue, sweetness goes with blues. And I think a sparkling wine that has a little more residual sugar would be a great match for this blue. I saw on the chat, somebody was talking about that they're having this cheese with honey, a cracker and some honey and a cashew. And I think that's a wonderful idea. Honey really helps to kind of mellow I find this blue pretty pungent, and the honey really helps to mellow that. Another little trick, and I hope Tony doesn't object to me saying this, but sometimes a little butter. If you find that the blue is very, very robust, a little too robust for you, a little butter will tame it, but the honey will do the same thing, or a little bit of jam. Is just a great way to make a blue more approachable when it's up there.
Or just break out the port or the sauterne and you're good to go. And actually with Roquefort, I think that's a very typical thing, isn't it, Janet, where they butter the bread and then they add the Roquefort?
Yeah. I've seen it done with Roquefort. I mean, some French people will cringe. Italians will certainly cringe, but I think it works. It's the way I was introduced to Roquefort as a kid, as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You had a very sophisticated.
It was my French teacher. She did it.
Okay. So let's talk about storing. So the long, well, I would put it back in its little cupcake container and put it back in its little box and just cover it, basically store it exactly as we received it. That's how I would do it. Janet, do you have any other ideas for that?
No, absolutely. Get it back in that little crate. It's kind of like a little cave, and just put some plastic wrap over the crate so it's not touching the cheese.
Exactly. And the Le Cremeux, so a cheese like this, I tend to, I will put parchment paper on it or wax paper, not plastic film over it, because that's the fast track to death, to cheese death, which you don't want to commit cheesicide. And then if you want, so one of the things about plastic wrap, sorry, not plastic, parchment, is that it breathes. So if you want to slow down that aeration process, there are two things you can and probably should do. One is to keep it in the drawer of your refrigerator, which is a more humid environment. And the other thing that I do is I then might either slip it into some sort of a plastic thing, whether it's a Ziploc or a plastic container, or sometimes just plastic wrap, and then I put it in the drawer. That's actually what I usually do with a cheese like this. And Tony, what about you? Do you have a recommendation for a cheese like this for storage?
That's exactly what I do, is put it in like a parchment or a freezer paper, and then put it in some sort of a baggie or something plastic. So the parchment is allowing it to breathe, keep the moisture away from the cheese. But if you just leave it in the parchment and you're going to keep it for a month, it's going to be turning very dry. So you want to keep it in that bag just to keep the moisture with the cheese. You don't want it to dry out.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Good to know I've been doing it right all this time.
Yes, definitely.
So Laura and I had a discussion about aluminum foil, and the fact that a lot of blues are wrapped in foil. And I said, well, yeah, that's true, but I never wrap my cheese in foil.
Yeah, it doesn't. It does. They do that more for presentation, but I don't think it keeps as well as it should. I've tried it over a long period of time, and the acidity of the cheese will actually start eating the aluminum foil.
Yeah. That's exactly what Janet's winemaker husband was concerned about, the chemist.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So it's better off, again, the same thing. Put it in some sort of a parchment paper, freezer paper, and a baggie again. Just so, it will get bluer, but if you can keep some of the moisture directly off the cheese, it will stay better.
But no plastic wrap, people.
No plastic wrap.
No.
Yeah.
Right. Jason, I'm curious, we had 4 very different cheeses today. It sounds like you're really a cheese lover. Are there any types of cheese that you traditionally look to with sparkling wine, or?
You know what? I grew up in a very working class, blue collar background where we grew up with that block of orange cheddar cheese from the supermarket, probably whatever was most cost effective. And as I've kind of grown throughout my career working for the Ritz-Carlton and working at multiple wineries, I think for me, cheese is really communal. And so what I tend to look for more is texture. I love things that are spreadable. I love things that we can put on a baguette, on like a cracker, things that can go on a sandwich. So I was really attracted to the soft cheeses. I love, and I'm going to mess up the pronunciation. So is it Langras? Help me out here. Langras. Thank you. I appreciate you. And then I really, of course, I'm a lover of blue cheese. So Tony, you had me hook, line, and sinker from the beginning. It was love at first sight, first taste rather. And I just think this is just a dynamic selection of cheeses. I'm so excited to share this, take these home, invite everyone over, and have a great sparkling cheese party tonight. It's happening.
Laura, you want to wrap us up here? I think we've come to the witching hour.
We have indeed. Yeah, I will. So first of all, I want to remind everybody that the Zoom recording, because I know you all want to see this again, is available, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, okay, once is enough. But if you have friends that want to see it, the cheese collections are still available. So just go to Janet's or my site and you can get the link. And that's one thing. And then the Zoom recording will be, well, the one from week 1 is already available on Janet's and my sites. And week 2 will be available, as Janet said earlier, in a couple of days at the latest. And so you can watch at your leisure with all of your friends. That might be your Christmas Eve event. Get the cheeses and
Yes.
I mean, or New Year's Eve, because break out the bubbles. Hello, you're going to be breaking them out anyway, aren't you? So, so get the cheeses, and also be sure to post on social media. Janet is at Janet Fletcher NV .com, just at Janet Fletcher NV. I forgot what
Napa Valley.
And I'm Cheese Lady at Cheese Lady, CheezeLady. Oh my God, I'm losing it. It's all the bubbles. Anyway, and uncork.com, which is where the source of our wines, and Sanford, and all of these. And Tony, do you have social media, sir? You back there in the middle point?
Should have, I do not.
Oh yeah, because you are.
I have a website.
He's in the cave.
I'm old.
Yeah, he's
Working in the cave.
He's like that Swiss man. I just want to say one really quick thing. So I know you all are dying to know how Wisconsin was named the Badger State, and it comes from Tony's town of Mineral Point, where it was mineral rich, and all the miners or speculators would come, and they would just dig these little burrows where they lived while they were mining. They just kind of set up camp there. And they were called the Badgers because they looked like badgers as they were.
Badgerals, right.
Anyway, so that's how Wisconsin became known as the Badger State. And I know you all wanted to know that, so I had to tell you.
Okay. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank Jason and Tony for helping and educate us about cheese and sparkling wine. And we're just very grateful to have all our guests with us, and we hope to see you again when Cheese O'Clock resumes, hopefully next year. Laura, always a pleasure to be with you.
And you as well. I just love Cheese O'Clock. I adore you. And I love having wine and cheese guests like you guys, because you're what makes it happen. So make it happen. So thank you for that. Thanks everybody for being here. We couldn't do it without you.
Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
for having us.
All right.